The meeting had been going on for 47 minutes. I knew this because I was watching the digital timer on the video call interface tick upward with the focus of a man waiting for a bomb to defuse. It was the only thing moving. The rest of my screen was a tomb. A grid of 25 faces, all trapped in their little digital boxes, all listening to our chief financial officer, Mark, drone on about Q4 synergy. My own face was in the bottom right corner, a tiny picture of calculated engagement. I had mastered the art of the interested nod. It was a subtle, slow dip of the chin that I deployed every 2 minutes, just enough to look like I was absorbing the corporate gospel. I was, of course, absorbing nothing. I was thinking about the coffee I had forgotten to brew and the fact that synergy was just a word people used when they couldn't describe an actual achievement. My eyes drifted across the mosaic of my colleagues. Sarah, from marketing, smiling so hard her eyes had disappeared. Kevin, in legal, clearly reading something on another monitor. And then, David. David was our team's golden boy, the star performer. The guy who always had the answer, who always hit his metrics, who always seemed to vibrate with a terrifying level of professional enthusiasm. But David looked like hell. His skin, usually ruddy and energetic, was a waxy, grayish-white. His eyes, normally sharp and focused, were sunken and dark, staring into his webcam with a flat, empty intensity. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week or maybe ever. I was about to message Sarah, "Are you good?" on the side chat when Mark finally stopped talking. "And for the Project Chimera update," Mark said, his voice tinny, "let's go to the man himself, David." David's microphone icon turned green. But he didn't speak. For 2 agonizing seconds he just stared. "David?" Mark repeated, a flicker of irritation in his voice. And then David's feed buffered. It was just for a moment. The familiar spinning circle appeared over his box, his image freezing and then dissolving into a mess of green and purple pixels. It happens. Bad connection, unstable network. Then the feed cleared. My breath hitched in my chest. I sat bolt upright, my interested nod forgotten. David was no longer alone in his frame. There was something on him. It was pale. Skeletal. It was wrapped around his shoulders like a grotesque shawl, its limbs so thin they looked like bundled sticks of chalk. 2 long, spider-like arms were stretched forward, and its fingers, impossibly long, white and tipped with something dark, were jammed hard into David's temples. Where its head should be, there was only a smooth, eyeless dome of bone-white skin, resting against the back of David's skull. I didn't blink. I couldn't. I was watching a stress-induced hallucination, a microsleep, a symptom of the sheer, soul-crushing boredom of corporate life. That had to be it. Then David spoke. "Thank you, Mark," he said. His voice was a perfect, flat monotone. "We are projecting a 97% optimization in asset leveraging by end of quarter." As he spoke, the thing on his back moved. Its head, the eyeless dome, tilted slightly. And from its face, where a mouth should be, a vertical slit, dark and wet, opened. It gaped, and its non-existent lips moved in perfect, grotesque synchronization with David's speech. It wasn't David talking. It was this thing. This auditor. It was wearing him like a suit, its fingers dug into his head like joysticks, its mouth forming the words that David's vocal cords were forced to produce. "The efficiencies gained from Chimera will redefine our workflow," David, the auditor, continued. The words were clean, corporate, sterile. But the image was a nightmare. I saw the thing's jaw stretch wide to accommodate the word redefine. I felt my stomach turn over. My coffee cup, half full of cold water, slipped from my hand and hit the carpet with a dull thud. The sound broke the spell. My head snapped down, and when I looked back up, David's feed glitched again. Just a half-second flicker of pixels. And the thing was gone. David was just David again. Pale, sick-looking, but horrifyingly alone in his sterile home office. He finished his update, his voice returning to its normal, if slightly hollow, cadence. "Excellent work, David," Mark said, oblivious. "Truly next level." I was breathing hard. My hands were shaking. I slammed my laptop's mute button and opened my private chat to Sarah. My fingers fumbled on the keys. "Did you see that?" I typed. The reply came back almost instantly. "See what?" On David's camera. The feed. The glitch. A 3-dot typing bubble appeared. "Don't see anything. He looks tired. But God, I wish I had his focus. He's nailing this presentation." I stared at her words. Nailing it. I looked back at the main screen. The meeting had already moved on. Someone from accounting was talking. The grid of faces was unchanged. Bored, smiling, nodding. I closed the chat window. I tried to slow my heart. It was a hallucination. A stress dream. A trick of the pixels and the late afternoon light. The meeting lasted another 19 minutes. I didn't hear a single word. I just stared at David's box. He looked normal. Empty but normal. But as the call was wrapping up, just as Mark was saying his goodbyes, David's eyes, which had been locked on his camera, drifted. They moved slowly, mechanically, across his own screen, as if he was scanning the grid of faces just as I had. His gaze landed on my box. On my face. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just looked at me. And I swear, deep in the reflection of his dead-looking eyes, I saw something pale. Something watching me back. I didn't sleep that night. Sleep wasn't an option. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that vertical, wet-looking mouth. I saw those long, white fingers digging into David's skin. The next morning I called in sick. I couldn't face the grid. I couldn't risk seeing it again. Or maybe I couldn't risk not seeing it, which would have been worse. That would have meant I was the one who was broken. I spent the day in a digital rabbit hole. The company kept a cloud-based archive of all major meetings. For transparency and training purposes, the HR manual said. For my purposes, it was a morgue and I was looking for a cause of death. I started 6 months ago. I found a Q1 kickoff call. And there he was. David. The man on the screen was a stranger. He was wearing a bright, rumpled t-shirt. He was laughing, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He made a joke about Kevin's cat walking across the screen. He was vibrant. He was messy. He was alive. I skipped ahead 3 months. The video was from the day Project Chimera was announced. David was named the team lead. He was still in a t-shirt, but the laughter was gone. He looked tired, yes, but it was more than that. He looked hollowed out. He was already pale. His posture was rigid. I checked the date. 3 months and 12 days ago. The day his promotion was finalized. I cross-referenced it with the company's internal social feed. There was a post from him that same day. A single, sterile sentence. I am pleased to accept this new challenge and am committed to driving results. I scrolled back. His post from the day before? A blurry photo of a half-eaten burrito captioned, "Lunch of Champions and Desperation." The person had been scrubbed clean. The employee remained. My obsession was now a conviction. I wasn't crazy. Something had happened to David. Something had latched onto him. And Project Chimera was ground zero. I needed a closer look. I needed proof. My hands were cold and clammy as I opened my company email. I composed a new message to David. Subject, Project Chimera Quick Sync? Hey David, got a few questions on the new Chimera interface. Any chance you have 15 minutes for a one-on-one this afternoon? Cheers, Alex. The reply came back in less than 10 seconds. It was not an email. It was a calendar invitation. 3:15 p.m. Today. No, hello. No, sounds good. Just the digital summits. At 3:14 p.m., my heart was a drum against my ribs. I launched a third-party screen recorder. I did not trust the company's built-in record function. I clicked the link. The video call window opened. David's face snapped into view. His camera was high definition. Too high. He was there. And it was there. My God, it was worse up close. It wasn't just on his shoulders. It was fused with him. The fabric of his crisp, blue button-down shirt seemed to melt into the creature's skin, which was the color and texture of old, damp parchment. It was part of his professional attire. I could see the veins running under its translucent skin, pulsing with a slow, thick, dark fluid. Its long fingers were not just at his temples. They were in them. The skin around the entry points was red and puckered, like a fresh wound, but dry. David's face was a perfect mask of corporate pleasantry. Alex, how can I optimize your workflow today? I swallowed, my throat clicking. Hi David. Yeah, I was just looking at the Chimera dashboard. I babbled for a full minute about user interface design, about friction points, and user journeys. I was pulling words out of the air, trying to sound normal. David, and the auditor, listened. The creature was perfectly still. It didn't even seem to be breathing. Just was. The interface is designed for maximum efficiency, David said, his voice as flat as a dial tone. The friction is the user. Adapt to the system, Alex. The system will not adapt to you. The words were chilling. But the delivery was what stopped my blood. There was no ego in it. No malice. It was a statement of fact, like a computer reading an error log. This was it. I had to know. You're right, I said, forcing a small, nervous laugh. Of course. Hey, this is totally off topic, but I was just looking at some old photos. Remember that team retreat, the one at the lake? 2 years ago? You tried to teach us all how to water ski. I had a flash of the real David from that day, sputtering in the water, laughing so hard he could barely stand. David's face froze. It wasn't a thinking face. It was a system crash. His mouth hung open slightly. His eyes, for a split second, went completely blank. On his shoulders, the auditor tensed. Its entire body seized. Its pale skin tightened over its skeletal frame, and I watched in gut-churning horror as its fingers visibly dug deeper into David's temples. David's head gave a tiny, spastic jerk. His eyes rolled back in his head, showing only the whites. "Alex," he said, and the voice was no longer his. It was deeper, with a wet, crackling undertone. The auditor's vertical mouth flexed, stretching wide. "We must maintain our focus on the assigned tasks. Personal recollections are an inefficient use of company time." My blood turned to ice. That wasn't just an HR line. That was it talking. I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed, staring at the monster on my screen. And then the auditor did the impossible. It had no eyes. Its head was a smooth, pale dome. But it knew I was watching. It knew I had seen it. Slowly, deliberately, its head detached from the back of David's skull. It turned, its movements stiff and unnatural, like a time-lapse video of a rotting flower. It turned until its eyeless, slit-mouthed face was no longer pointed at David, but was staring directly into David's webcam. Directly at me. Its vertical mouth slowly peeled open, revealing an oily, pulsating darkness inside. It saw me. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound. I slammed my laptop shut. The screen went black, but the image was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. The room was silent, save for the frantic, wet hammering of my own heart. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dead black plastic of the closed laptop. The machine was off. The connection was cut. But I had never felt less alone in my life. My laptop stayed closed for hours. I left it on the floor, a dark plastic square I couldn't bring myself to touch, as if it were a dormant animal that might wake and bite. Darkness fell. The blue-white light of the city filtered through my blinds, striping the walls. The silence in my apartment was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I had to know. I had to know if the recording had captured what I saw. If the creature knew it was being recorded. At 2:17 in the morning, fueled by a terrifying blend of exhaustion and adrenaline, I finally opened the machine. I didn't connect to the internet. I was terrified of what might be waiting on the other side of that connection. I stayed offline. I opened the folder containing the third-party screen recording. My hand was shaking so badly it took 2 tries to double-click the file. The video player opened. My own face, pale and sweaty, stared back at me from the corner of the recording. I fast-forwarded through the agonizingly normal part of the call, my own idiotic babbling about user journeys. I stopped the recording right at the moment I asked the personal question. The one about the lake. I hit play. I watched David's face freeze. I watched his eyes roll back. I watched again as the auditor's fingers dug deeper into his flesh. I heard its voice, that wet, crackling distortion. Personal recollections are an inefficient use of company time. My breath hitched. And then it happened. On the recording. Clear as day. The eyeless head. Detaching. Turning. The impossible, slow-motion swivel as it faced the camera. As it faced me. Its vertical mouth peeled open. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a data point. It was a fact. I had a 200 megabyte video file of a monster wearing my colleague, and it had stared right at the man who was documenting it. My heart hammered. This thing wasn't just in David's office. It was in the call. It lived in the data, in the stream. And then, the connection snapped in my mind, so hard and so obvious that I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. Project Chimera. The name itself was a sick joke. A chimera. A creature made of mismatched parts. I looked at my desktop. The installation icon was still there, a sleek, corporate blue C that had been pushed to every employee's machine. It had been waiting for me to click Install for the last 72 hours. A new, fully integrated efficiency software. The original email had read, Project Chimera will interface with all core company functions, streamlining your workflow, optimizing your output, and creating a more harmonious corporate synergy. Integrate. Streamline. Synergy. These weren't just buzzwords. They were symptoms. I went back online. I needed to see the beta test roster. The email was from 3 months ago. Congratulations to our Chimera pioneers. David's name was at the top. And right below it, Sarah. My stomach dropped. Sarah. The one who thought David was nailing it. The one who hadn't seen the glitch. I opened the company's internal social media feed. I searched for Sarah's profile. Her profile picture had always been a goofy shot of her in a park, holding her ridiculous, fluffy dog. That picture was gone. The new one, uploaded just 2 days ago, was a professional headshot. She was wearing a gray blazer. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, tight bun. Her smile was a thin, wide red line that did not, under any circumstances, reach her eyes. Her eyes were flat, waxy, empty. She looked just like David. As if summoned by the thought, a notification popped up on my screen. A new calendar invitation. Event, mandatory team huddle time, 10:30 a.m. Organizer, Sarah. It was 10:29. I had no choice. I had to join. I had to see. I clicked the link. The grid of faces appeared. My team. 8 faces, all staring into their webcams. And Sarah. "Good morning, team," she said. Her voice, once warm and prone to sarcastic asides, was now as crisp and clean as a freshly printed memo. And it was there. It was on her. It was smaller than David's. Less developed. It looked like a larval stage, its skin still glistening and translucent. It wasn't fully fused to her blazer yet. Its long, pale fingers weren't in her temples, but they were on them, resting there, as if an old-fashioned telephone operator were gently plugging her into a new reality. It was nursing. "I've reviewed our Q4 metrics," Sarah continued, her gaze fixed. "Our synergy is lagging by 4%. This is an unacceptable deviation. We must optimize." Synergy. Optimize. I looked around the grid. Kevin, Maria, Tom. All of them had been on the pioneer list. And I could see it. On all of them. It was fainter, a digital afterimage, a shimmer in the feed, but it was there. A small, pale shape on Kevin's back. A long, thin finger resting on Maria's shoulder. The auditors were multiplying. They were spreading through the network, and the efficiency software was the vector. They weren't just controlling the employees. They were feeding on them. They were consuming the human part, the laughter, the messiness, the inefficient personal recollections, and leaving only the resource. My mouse moved on its own. I clicked stop video. I clicked mute. In the chat I typed, "Sorry, connection issues. My video is lagging." An email notification chimed instantly. Not from Sarah. Not from a person. From HR_system@corp.com subject. Non-compliance warning, Project Chimera. Dear Alex, the email read, "Our records indicate you have failed to install the mandatory Project Chimera software, now 2.35 days past the deadline. This is a core component of your workflow. Failure to integrate by end of day will be noted in your permanent performance review as failing to embrace company values." I looked back at the video call. The 8 faces of my colleagues were no longer looking at their cameras. They were all looking at my icon. My blank, black square. Their expressions were identical. A homogeneous, cold disapproval. They weren't just waiting for me to fix my connection issues. They were waiting for me to let it in. I was now failing to embrace company values. This was the corporate equivalent of heresy. It was a death knell. I stared at the email from the HR bot, the words permanent performance review, glowing like a radioactive threat. They weren't asking me to join anymore. They were telling me. I looked at the clock. 3:50 p.m. My performance review was in 10 minutes. I had no choice. I couldn't quit. Quitting meant interviews, reference checks, new onboarding. It meant plugging myself right back into the grid. Where would I go? Another company? Another grid? How did I know their synergy was any more human? I couldn't run. And I wouldn't join. That left one option. Fight. How do you fight a ghost in the machine? How do you attack a thing that lives in the bandwidth, a parasite that feeds on buzzwords? You give it what it hates. They wanted optimization. I would give them chaos. They wanted synergy. I would give them noise. They wanted a clean, efficient signal. I would give them a digital, screaming, unholy mess. I spent the next 9 minutes in a flurry of coding I didn't know I was capable of. I wasn't just a cog. I was a cog with access to the machine's guts. I didn't need a complex virus. I needed a bomb. A noise bomb. I pulled open a command line. I wrote a script. A simple, brutal loop designed to do one thing: find the active video call process and flood it. I didn't flood it with data. I flooded it with junk. I pointed the script at a corrupted gigabyte-sized audio file on my hard drive, a recording I'd accidentally made years ago of a microphone feeding back into an amplifier. It was a digital shriek, a sound that was pure, weaponized chaos. I added a visual layer, A simple program that would seize the video feed and replace it with a rapid, strobing flicker of pure white and pure black. My trap was set. My finger was on the enter key. 4 o'clock. An email chimed. Not a calendar reminder. A direct message. From David. Subject, now. The link was in the body. I clicked it. The call window opened. It wasn't a performance review. It was a tribunal. David was in the center square, his feet crystal clear. To his left, Sarah. To his right, 2 other managers, both from the Project Chimera Pioneer list. All 4 cameras were on. And all 4 were fully, grotesquely hosted. The larval stages were over. The auditors were mature. They were no longer a glitch, no longer a bad connection shimmer. They were present. They were bold, pale, and fused to their hosts like fungal growths, their fingers sunk to the knuckle in the waxy flesh of their hosts' temples. They stared at me. All 4. In perfect, synchronized, unblinking unison. Alex, David said. But the voice was wrong. It was a chorus. It was David's flat monotone, layered with Sarah's new, crisp precision, and the rattling, dry undertones of the other 2. It was the sound of a committee. It was the sound of synergy. We are concerned about your output, the chorus voice said, the words wet and precise. Your refusal to integrate. It is time for your optimization. As they spoke, all 4 auditors leaned forward. Their vertical mouths gaped open. They were preparing to transmit. They were going to force the install, push the parasite through the screen. Now, Alex, Sarah's voice added, peeling away from the chorus for a moment, sharp and cold as glass. Just click, install. You'll find it so much more efficient. No, I whispered. My hand was poised over the keyboard. You first. I slammed the enter key. The script executed. The effect was not subtle. It was a digital nuclear bomb. My program didn't just flood the call, it shattered it. The gigabyte of corrupted audio, that digital scream, hit the feed at full volume. The screen instantly tore, the visual feed collapsing as the strobe script took over. The composed, corporate grid vanished, replaced by a blinding, flashing, violent strobe of pure black and pure white. And the sound. It was a shriek. A deafening, digital, agonizing howl that burst from my speakers so loud it physically rattled my desk. But it was drowned out by the screams from the call. Through the flashing static, I saw images, snapshots of agony. The auditors recoiled as if they'd been doused in acid. The noise was anathema to them. It was the opposite of their sterile, optimized order. It was chaos. It was useless data. Their pale, skeletal forms convulsed. They were ripped from their host. I saw David, really saw him, his own hands flying to his head as he collapsed, his mouth open in a human scream. I saw Sarah thrown backward from her chair, the larval auditor on her back dissolving like sugar in water. The auditors themselves were glitching, their forms tearing, stretching, their vertical mouths wide in a soundless digital howl of pure agony. They were dissolving, pixel by pixel, consumed by the very data stream they had sought to command. The last thing I saw before the connection died was David's face. His real face. His eyes were wide, terrified, and, for a split second, grateful. Then the call terminated. Connection lost. The screen went black. Silence. My apartment was dead silent. I was hyperventilating, my entire body shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. The smell of ozone, or maybe just burnt plastic, filled my nostrils. I stared at the black screen, at my own pale, terrified reflection. I did it. I killed them. Or I freed them. I had no idea. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I stood up, my own legs unsteady. I had to get out. I had to get air. But as I looked at the dark monitor, a new, colder thought settled in. I had just declared war on a parasite. A parasite that owned the company. A company that owned me. I hadn't won. I had just rung the dinner bell. CD insertion. If you're finding yourself lost in this story, wondering if this is a nightmare or just another Tuesday in the remote work hellscape, consider subscribing to Silent Vanish. It ensures you won't miss the conclusion, and it helps us continue bringing these nightmares to life. Now, I had to figure out what came next. The silence in my inbox was no longer a comfort. It was a countdown. The silence was worse than the screaming. I sat in the dark for hours. I waited for the police to knock, for the company's private security, for something. Nothing came. The connection was cut, and I was just a man in a room staring at a dead laptop. I did not sleep. I watched the sun come up, the gray city light slowly filling my apartment. I was fired. I had to be. I had assaulted 4 of my colleagues and destroyed a multi-million-dollar project. Or I had exposed a parasitic entity and saved them. Either way, my career was over. At 9:05 a.m., I did the only thing I could think to do. I made a pot of coffee. The real kind, the kind you brew. As the water dripped, I opened my laptop. I stayed offline, but my Wi-Fi was automatically searching. My inbox was empty. No urgent messages from HR. No frantic pings from my team. No termination letter. Nothing. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. A clean slate. I sat there watching the blank inbox for an hour. My coffee went cold. At 10:17 a.m. an email appeared. My heart tried to exit my chest. It wasn't from HR. It wasn't from David. It was from the CEO. A name I had only ever seen on mass-market holiday emails. A man who, to my knowledge, did not actually exist outside of a stock photo on the About Us page. Subject: Postmortem, company-wide town hall time, 11:00 a.m. Today. Attendance: mandatory. There was a link. My hand was hovering over the script I'd written, The Noise Bomb. I was ready to press enter, the second I saw anything pale, anything with too many fingers. At 11:00 on the dot, I clicked the link. The call opened. It was a town hall format, which meant my camera and mic were disabled by default. I was just a viewer. Over 300 employees were already in the audience. The screen was black, then it resolved. The CEO appeared. He wasn't a stock photo. He was a man probably in his late 50s with a kind, tan face and a reassuring smile. He was sitting in an office that looked like a wood-paneled library, not a sterile home setup. His camera quality was immaculate. 4K. "Good morning, everyone," he said. His voice was warm like a podcast host. "Thank you for joining me on such short notice." He took a sip of water. "We had a significant event yesterday. A massive, unexpected server crash. It appears a corrupted data packet originating from the Project Chimera beta test group caused widespread system failure and data corruption." He sighed, shaking his head with the practiced empathy of a politician. "The servers are stable now. We are back online. But unfortunately, the corruption was not just digital. It was human." I held my breath. "It is with a heavy heart," the CEO continued, "that I must announce we have had to part ways with David Miller, Sarah Jenkins, and 2 other managers on the Chimera team." My blood ran cold. Part ways. The instability of the system seems to have caused a profound breakdown in their ability to interface with company protocols. They simply couldn't handle the new workflow. They became inefficient. He wasn't lying. "But," he said, and his smile returned, "every crisis is an opportunity. This incident showed us who on our team is truly resilient. It showed us who can handle disruptions." He looked down as if checking a note. "I want to personally thank Alex Mason." He said my name. "Alex, your system logs show you remained stable during the entire crisis. You resisted the corruption. You maintained your integrity. You didn't just embrace company values, you defended them." He looked right into the camera. Right at me. "That's the kind of resilience we value here. That's the kind of person we want to lead. Which is why," the CEO said, his smile widening, "I am pleased to offer Alex David's old position. Head of Project Chimera. Effective immediately." I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The CEO chuckled as if he'd just told a wonderful joke. "We'll be in touch about the details, Alex. We know you'll do great things." He started to wrap up the call, talking about the future, about a cleaner, more optimized workflow. But I wasn't listening. I was watching the shadow in the library behind him. As the CEO smiled and said his goodbyes, something moved from the darkness behind his expensive leather chair. It was a hand. It was massive. Pale. With 5, 6, 7 long chalk-white fingers, like the legs of a spider crab. It rested gently on the CEO's shoulder. He gave him a single, supportive pat. The CEO didn't flinch. He just kept smiling, his eyes locked on the camera. His feed was perfect. Crystal clear. There was no glitch. There was no buffer. This wasn't an infection. This was the source. The call ended. The screen went black. I stared at my own reflection in the dark monitor. I was pale. I was shaking. And in the reflection, I saw the small green webcam light at the top of my laptop. It flicked on. By itself. The call was over. But I was still connected. The story has ended, but the silence remains. For the full visual experience, search for Silent Vanish on YouTube and subscribe. You can also find the audio-only version wherever you get your podcasts.